Cool. So guys, we're live. Everyone on Social Samosa Network can view us. Hello and welcome to the first ever roundtable we are hosting in 2021. And this is an agency leaders edition wherein we have uh, agency leaders from different walks of the industry coming together to have a discussion on the current state of advertising and marketing and what are the kind of learnings we've seen in the past 1 year, the last year being a very milestone year. So we have with us Josy Paul, he's the chairman and CCO at BBDO India. We have Mr. Rana Barua, he's the group CEO Havas Group India. We have Mr. Preetham Venkky, he's the president and chief digital officer at DDB Mudra Group. We have Mr. Anil Nair, he's the CEO at VMLY&R India. We have Anita Kotwani. She's the CEO at Carat India. We have Ritu Sharda. She's the CCO at Ogilvy India. We have Rohit Ohri. He's the chairman and CCO at FCB Group India. And then last but not the least, we have Pooja Jauhari. She's the CEO at The Glitch. I hope I've covered everyone because I mean that's how like the sequence is what I can see. So guys, like I was discussing, since we have 8 people on the panel, I would be the one who talk the least, and we would try to recap the year that was. Since this was, like I said, it was a milestone year. We all saw how the pandemic took us to a back foot and we started adapting with remote working, and then we were forced or we were forced to sort of start thinking out of the box while staying inside the box, and then came hope in terms of IPL and the festive season, and now we are all on the road to recovery. So like I would quickly want to understand from your perspective, your vantage point, how the year was for each one of you. We could probably start with you, Rana, and then you could pass on the baton to the second person.
Thanks. Thank you. I think, just to keep it short, because there are so many of us, I think for us at the Havas group, naturally, it was a year of just taking stock of a lot of things that were happening. We were in the middle of a lot of acquisitions. We were looking at growth. We were looking at investments in a very large way. While we kept all of that going and things happening and all, I think we also took stock of kind of readapting to a lot of model. And I think the biggest focus was on costs and no beating away from that bit, because the idea was that, how do you keep afloat and not sink? And, in one line, I can tell you that when we had the last Mancom in December and the first one in January, I think we were extremely happy to see all, still surviving this entire battle. We've gone through a lot of very strong ups and downs in terms of, managing the people, managing costs. We've had our successes, we've had our business wins and all, but I think overall, I think the entire glory that we've kept together is to say that we survived, and we are definitely confident that we will manage 2021, and we are pretty positive about the way it's all started now. We are not jumping the gun or anything, but I think we are pretty positive about it. So let's keep fingers crossed on that one. So whoever can take on after this, it's yours. Thanks.
I'll go next if it's okay. You know what? For me, it was amazing because I gave birth to myself. I was it was like a rebirth. And it's just, through all that anxiety and fear and everything, the constraints were actually giving you a kick. And it forced us and me to both disrupt myself and the organization. And I think what's happened because of it is that everyone's got an open mind because you're forced to. There's no other option. And I think that sort of breaking of the self or breaking of organizations is what we're going through. And we're still going through. And it's beautiful. Therefore, I say, I gave birth to myself.
So,
Okay.
sorry. I just wanted to add to that because Josy has given me a segue. I don't know how many of you know, but Josy was born in an earthquake and he's born again the second time during the world's worst pandemic. So Josy, obviously, when you're born, there's a disaster, right? So I just couldn't resist that had to be said because Josy's always said he was born during an earthquake, right, Josy?
That's exactly what I was going to say. You just beat me to that.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, but thanks for that. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, please.
Yeah. So for me, obviously there was an impact on the business and all that. But somebody told me this, and I thought that was very interesting. They said, when there's a storm in the sea, what do fishermen do? Right? They don't really go out to fish. They fix their nets. Right? So I think this was a beautiful metaphor, and I thought that kind of was a lot of the stuff that we were doing, because obviously with the global pandemic, we were going to see a major change, and it's not going to be something that would kind of it's just like a recession and it'll go away. I think there was a significant behavior change in the consumers across, right? So people were living and viewing life a lot differently, and I think understanding that and really gearing up for 2021 was really one of the big things that at least for me, was a an opportunity. And I think the last thing I'd like to say, of course, there are lots of people here, so we kind of keep it brief. But for me, the other really fantastic thing that the pandemic did and 2020 was really the emergence of leaders, because in the time of crisis, I think you really saw who were the real people who could lead the organization, be the best successors, because it's at this time that the grain and the chaff kind of get separated, and you could see the real leaders emerge, and I think that was really valuable for me as a leader, especially.
I'll go next. I think the great point about, like, I think a lot of us saw that there was no place to hide for a lot of people. I think there were a lot of people who, the people who really brought something to the table became the real heroes. But I think for me, I think it was never before has the world been more united than it was. I think we were all going through the same thing at the same time. While you had nowhere to look for learning, I think there was a great unity and somewhere a great peace that we were all in it together. Um, I think this was a year of the most amazing stories of hope, resilience, stories of fighting something again all together. And I think from the time I joined advertising, a lot of people always told me, all great ideas have been done. We're all, sab kuch ho chuka hai. Everybody's seen everything. We're just repackaging everything. And I think this year and its stories opens up a new world, some with new problems, but lots of new things to do. And I think the world has suddenly changed. And I just feel that there's so much more to do, and there's so much more to tell, and there's so many new ideas to do, that it's really a fresh birth for everybody, not just Josy.
I could go next. I actually have another storm metaphor, which I heard, that every storm in life is not set to destroy you. Some actually clear your way. And that happened to me because for me, the year started well, and then we went through the shitstorm that we all went through. And I, just mentally sort of spiraled really out of control and went into a deep well. And while nobody could see it, the work that I did on myself and the work that I did with a professional coach has completely changed me as a person. And I think I focused a lot on, preventive mental health rather than reactive mental health, which has just been fantastic. Productivity went through the roof. We reshaped our organization. We came out of it looking completely different. The nets and all of that was all done. And, it helped me as a person, because today as a leader, I think very differently. My main focus as we get into 2021 is not about, hey, are we going to be able to sail through, but is my organization emotionally safe? Is everyone feeling comfortable? Is everyone feeling protected? And if everyone's feeling protective, everyone's mentally strong, everything's going to be okay. And, that was my path and my journey. But over to the next one.
Thanks. Maybe I'll go next if it's all right with everybody. So just to take on what take on ahead of what Pooja had said. Actually, I had a very interesting experience myself. I just moved countries towards the end of 2019. And as I began 2020, I think we had one of the best quarters to begin with. And historically, both within the group as well as within 22 Feet, they were the best quarters that we had ever seen. And then, Bank hit middle of March, and we had taken a decision to actually go into a little bit of a work from home scenario even before the announcements were made. And it was very clear within the next 2 or 3 weeks what was going to happen. So of course, second quarter was the worst, but I have to tell you that the true resilience of people just came through. I've always believed that you build organizations on 3 pillars, people always at the center of it, followed by processes and the products and platforms that you tend to use in order to get the work done. And I think we saw quick adaptation and a lot of dynamism that essentially came out of it. In marketing, we always talk about personalization, but imagine you were to try and deploy those principles internally to begin with. So we took refuge in one of James Clear's principles, which is build some of the muscle memory through atomic habits, 1% bit by bit every day. So there were a lot of 1% sessions that we did as an organization at large, across 400 odd people. And every day there was something new to learn and a new way to essentially reconfigure yourself. There was this very interesting saying that one of the former deputy prime ministers of Singapore had said, which is, you don't have to just worry about what you have to learn. You have to also worry about what you're losing in that learning experience. So trying to not just, learn the new things, but then also worry about what you've essentially lost during the pandemic became extremely important. And that was an insight on which we wanted to ensure that we don't lose that essence of what is it that we're essentially focused on. And the good thing is that despite all its trials and tribulations, the end of the year, the plan that we'd set out as the middle of the year happened, we were able to essentially complete that. And I think 2021 is off to a completely different start, hopefully as fresh as it was at the beginning of 2020.
I really, Preetham, thanks for the lovely bout of enthusiasm. As much as I know what this pandemic did to all of us, but the interesting thing is I feel that the world needs a good crisis once in a while, because, we was in a very, very nice, comfortable boat, all of us, the world totally in that sense. And some of the world's greatest bouts of creativity have always kind of followed, incidents of this nature. And I just feel that it's kind of erupted so many different thoughts, avenues, including things that we took for granted, and I believe it's a epochal kind of shift, and we'll see effects of this going and kind of rolling out in many more years. So the only one last piece is I just want to kind of tip my hat to all of us advertising people, because I genuinely believe that we are like hard as nails motherfuckers who can kind of really go through whatever. So my point is, I think if any bunch of people can kind of get through this, I think it's advertising people. So to everybody out there, hang in there. There are better times to come.
And if I can go next, given the fact that I think I was possibly one of the few CEOs who joined Carat during the pandemic. So I went on board on June 1st. So it was pretty interesting to join in a situation where the boats were all shaky. And I think you really needed to have an ace up your sleeve. And let me use that acronym in an interesting way, where I really look at the A as the agility that we needed to kind of pivot our businesses, whether it was from physical proximity to moving into virtual proximity and quickly trying to understand how are we going to service our clients and our businesses. When I take the C, I really look at the collaboration that we really needed to work together, not only with our vendors, partners, clients, but the people at large, including our diversified services offerings. How do you kind of collaborate, come together in the virtual environment to still go ahead and deliver to the client's briefs and objectives? And I think that the E part, the part of empathy, which was the biggest component of 2020 for everybody, it was really around this purpose before profit. You really didn't worry about saying, am I making the OP margins? Am I really driving the top line revenues, etc.? You were taking cognizance of your people. You wanted to ensure that there is job safety, there is security for them. You tried to minimize the impact as much as you could because you wanted to be seen as an organization. We are a service industry, obviously, so talent and talent pool are our assets. So the security of them was of paramount importance to all of us. So to me, interestingly, if you had that ace up our sleeve with the agility, collaboration, and empathy, I think we were able to sail 2020 fairly well.
And I think the common sentiment here is that sentiment in the sense like the common feeling that we've all gone through in the past 1 year is that we've sort of learned some new skill sets like agility or resilience for that matter. And these are not some skill sets which we might have gone and like taken up actively, but something by force that has happened to all of us. And similarly, I think as advertising professionals, all of us have learned uh, this lesson the hard way. But like there is this saying which I think a lot of us have seen in media out there from leaders such as you guys, is that creativity flourishes or thrives in adversity. So like how did you guys manage to foster creativity while facing the storm head on? And like what are some of the great campaigns that you have seen and observed, even if it is not coming from you or your network, but you felt that this is one piece of communication that like that just ticks all boxes for that matter? I think like either Rohit or Josy, you guys could take a start, and then we could and then you can always pass on the baton like the last one.
Over to you, Rohit.
Okay, I was just going to say over to you, Josie. Okay, so the interesting part of it was we did a little bit of an analysis after the pandemic and the lockdown actually started. Is that whole thing of sameness. Everybody had the same kind of advertising with using the same stock footage, the same sad music, and the same voice of God, and regurgitating a lot of the empty streets and people suffering and all that. And we looked at it and we said, okay, this is good for this period, but it's not really the creative that we want for our brand. So, and I think that little bit of shake up, because everybody had settled into the way I was looking at it, you shrunk your creativity, you shrunk your imagination to fit into this little box that of what is possible, right? So very clearly there were challenges, but interestingly for us, I think two pieces of communication that we did in the pandemic where there was a complete lockdown, right? So we did these two pieces of work for Horlicks, which actually went on to become and recognized by Horlicks as their best pieces of communication during the pandemic globally, right, across brands. So, and this was for Unilever, not for GSK, but both these were done. And the one that I really want to talk about is, the tire film, which was entirely shot during the lockdown, and we shot it in Goa. So, it's a question of actually getting used to a new way, and then saying that, okay, we have to find a way out of the constraints, because the fantastic thing, I just love that with our clients when I used to always tell them that, look, your factories are shut, right? In the lockdown, your factories are shut, but our factories are open, right? Our factories are open. We're just, they've just now working from a different place. We've moved our factories and we are manufacturing our ideas and creating, work for brands, from home. So that was a beauty. Over to you, Josy.
Yeah, I'll just take it from there. There were two experiences, actually one experience and one which I think, which is not our work, which I really love. The bit about the work that, made me think that there's a new way of working was in April, May, we did this campaign for WhatsApp Worldwide. We shot 9 films across the world, sitting from our homes, collaborating with our offices in Germany and Brazil and Mexico and Australia. And I was leading that. I was the creative lead on WhatsApp for the world. I mean, sounds big, right? For the world, shit. It's just, yeah, for WhatsApp. So that experience of working with the people in Menlo Park was something I'd never expected in my life. It was like, I can't believe we did it. Talk to so many different directors, so many different people, arriving at a core idea. I mean, you just realize that people are just amazing. And the thing is, I didn't do anything. It was just people teaching me stuff about how you can manage through Zoom or through other sort of technologies that they had invented to make it happen. So that was a big learning for me that opened my mind and was part of the rebirth. The other thing I see is the work for Match.com, not done by us. It's done, I think, directly by the company. I'm not sure, with the actor himself. And you might have seen it, right? Where the devil plays, the devil is looking for a match and he finds 2020 who's this young girl. And it's so brilliantly done. Can't believe it was done during the lockdown or during that period. And that for me is my favorite piece of 2020, like by far. It's just brilliant.
I'll go next. If so, yeah, Josy, that's a beautiful piece, Match.com. I think during the pandemic, a lot of kids in and around us really upscaled a lot, and we got a lot of voiceover artists and animators and artists and people who illustrated beautifully, and they were all found during the pandemic. And I think there were two pieces of work that I'd like to talk about that we had done. We did this piece that we created completely in-house, and it was a 4-part campaign called Kano Pe Zimmedari. And it was something that I could never have imagined had the pandemic not happened. We would have been able to pull it off, because it was done completely in-house, the voiceover, the animation, and it was really beautiful. And I think this year we all got a lot of time to focus on how to change over to digital, or to become more digital and more integrated. And I think there was this beautiful piece that happened out of the Bombay office, which was not just a Cadbury ad. And again, that was something that I think the pandemic really played its part in that, because everybody was very inclined to looking for a different way of doing things. So I think for me, these two pieces of work pretty much defined what was amazing about our year, and how adversity brings out the best in people. And I would go on to say exactly what Anil said, that hats off to us advertising people, the way we took to it. It was like it was a new ocean, and we learned to swim, and we did so well. I mean, if I see the kind of work that came out of everywhere, it was just something you don't expect happening in 1 year. It was like 1 year of really good work.
Yeah. I'll go next. As much as a lot of agencies throw and have done great work and snatches of great work I've seen all over, I'll restrict mine to India. And there is an underlaying of technology in both these ideas. One of them is the Cadbury's idea. I know it's much spoken about, but to kind of sell that during this time, to collaborate with all the partners involved. And when I spoke to some of the teams internally, the pain that they went through to even put that out, and to have a purpose kind of a shield over it to help the small business guys. I just thought that it was really interesting, and I can imagine the pain to kind of bring that together. The other one was from something that we created, which honestly we didn't know how, what it would become. But we knew that, there were people out there suffering from dental problems, and then there were a whole bunch of dentists that Colgate had. And in 20 days, we managed to put a platform together. So the out of work dentists were given a chance, and there was a whole bunch of people out there with dental problems. And dentists were the last things that was going to open during the first few months of the pandemic. And I just felt good that we managed to kind of using a brand and using technology, put something out there that could help people, other than the usual song and dance that we all do. So both these, and I feel these are, many more ideas like these will come, which is culture, creativity, technology, all three of it coming together.
Maybe if I'll go next. Thanks, Anil. So there are two things that come to mind. One, I think, which has very little to do with clients or advertising. I think just after the shutdown happened, we managed to go into a 24 to a 48-hour hackathon of sorts internally. And one of the things that the team was tasked to do was trying to find solutions for real-world problems to begin with. And one of the problems that became consistently clear is that all of the headlines that were taking place during that time were about face value numbers around how many cases, how many people were infected, how many deaths, and a very, very morose way of just looking at the problem to begin with. So the team said, why don't we just look at, second order data sets and then see how do you contextualize to each of the markets to begin with. So just out of that 48 hours came one of those very interesting tools, which has got talked about quite a bit as well. And increasingly, there were a group of doctors who came back and told us that that's our first homepage that we launch when we wake up in the morning, because we want to see the contextual numbers and not just those, really huge numbers that all of the publications are essentially publishing across. So this was very contextualized to every region. It was a function of the population. It made a lot of sense. And it had a lot of those valuations using data in a very interesting manner to add value to that conversation. But the second thing, which I think became very amply clear, was the way that we could not just keep control, but we had the ability to give control to others as well. So one of the campaigns that were done for Hotstar and Disney Plus was completely shot with parents who were completely locked down at home, the craziness that they were feeling along with their kids when they were all in the same place. And I think the craft itself, we were able to best control to others. And the output was actually pretty interesting, given the situation that we were in at that given point in time. So those are the two things that come to mind. But one strong learning is that you're able to then give control to people beyond the current ecosystem of the agency that you see or that you identify with. And I think that goes a long way in building that learning in the long term as well.
I could go next.
Okay, go ahead, Pooja.
No, you go. I'll go after you. Go ahead.
No problem. So the one that I think really stood out for me was Amol, which usually comes up with absolutely awesome tactical campaigns. And this one was earlier on in the lockdown, where they've actually, when Mr. Modi was talking about taking the thalis and going out in a simple communication which said, "Khali haath nahi, thali haath thanks kijiye." Very simple, very clean, straightforward. Love the way they kind of usually land up communicating each of those situational advertising perfectly well. So that stood out for me. The other one that I really loved, it's a global one. It was Mercedes, the Stay at Home campaign. Again, very simple, clean, straightforward kind of campaign. You're not taking your car anywhere. You're not moving. It's just parked inside your house. And you're simply talking and thanking everybody outside who's outside there saving you. So those two really stood out for me. And back home, one of our brands for Philips, we had Virat, trimming using the Philips trimmer at home. So we pushed that out in social media, actually having him kind of use the trimmer during the lockdown, and got some mileage going in for our brand Philips. So those are the 2 or 3 that really stood out for me.
Thanks, Anita. I'll go next. So there were a lot of campaigns that I could talk about, but I'm going to talk about one specifically that went live within a couple of weeks of the lockdown. So it was right at the start when we were all figuring out how we're going to put this out. And this is for Netflix. The biggest piece that everyone was talking about online was the fact that who's going to create content now, and people are going to run out of content. And so that was really the first trigger, that how can we create content for Netflix, even when production houses were all shut, was one. We then went to saying, okay, what kind of content should we actually create? And we looked at what people were talking about. People were freaked out about the impact of lockdown on love, impact of lockdown on mental health, impact of lockdown on celebrations, and impact of lockdown on actually fear of meeting new people. So when it came to mental health, we created a story, really interesting one, of a guy who suffered from agoraphobia, the fear of actually leaving home. And the story was that this guy had just gotten over his phobia, and we were in lockdown all over again. So it was a fantastic story that was shot in his house. So I'll tell you guys how we did it, but the stories first. The second one, the story of the impact on love. People on a first date, suddenly together, and the next day we're locked down. So what happens then? When the impact of lockdown, meeting strangers, how are we reacting to delivery people? And when it came to celebrations, it was a story about a father who's been waiting to get his daughter married and suddenly had to do it on Zoom. So these are 4 unique stories which were crafted, were shot on Zoom. Everything was produced, directed online. And the fact that it happened just 2 weeks after lockdown, and we put together an entire show, 4 stories that went out, truly showed me what my people were capable of. Because this is right at the beginning of lockdown. And that obviously set the tone for what the rest of the year looked like, because we did a lot of amazing high quality work after that. But this is a great example of people, of leadership at every level, of writing that was so unique, and stories that were just built through real conversations online. So that was fantastic. I'm really proud of it.
I'll just kind of just close this entire discussion because I think we've kind of touched upon all the work. I think the good thing that I observed, and I don't know whether it appeals to everyone, when March, April, May happened, and I was a bit worried. You know, what work will we be doing? Because it's like Rohit said, आपके factories बंद है, हमारे factories खुले. So factories were open from our end. But then around April, May, I think I realized that work was coming out of the woodwork. It was, I think, the busiest year may not have resulted in the maximum numbers or revenues. If I keep that bit aside, I think it's been the busiest year ever, at least in one of my career experiences. The amount of work and briefs and interactions, and I've seen, whether you call it essential advertising, non-essential advertising, one of the biggest clients on the creative side is Reckitt. On the media side is Hyundai, you have Swiggy. Everybody was active. The kind of work that was continuously coming out of Reckitt was killing people, but we knew that, you had to do this work non-stop. People were launching two-wheelers, we were launching, and I think the other phase that came was just before the festive and pre-IPL. So I think there's been a lot of work that's come out of this table. We did some pro bono work. We worked with the IA to help the Amphan, people. That was some great work that we actually came out and said, let's do something interesting if we could do, because it was a total lockdown. And the kind of work that's happened on especially Reckitt, I think Reckitt has had a glorified, in terms of numbers, they've really broken through, because with most of the brands and the kind of work, nothing clearly stands out. But I think because, if I try and get into individual specs, that I think the work has been, like somebody mentioned, it's, I think Anil, you were saying, I think it's staggering the way we pulled out the work, whether it's the digital domain, whether it's experiential platform, whether it's, showbiz, the way they've been working in the digital world. If I look at the kind of stuff Think Design has been doing, Havas Media has been doing, it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. So, so I think that's been fantastic. So there's really some good work across the group for us.
So,
Hitesh, you're on mute.
Sorry. So I'm saying that's a good snapshot of the kind of work that has happened during lockdown. So I want to take a step ahead, and I wanted to understand, like, I think Rana, we had a conversation, I think April, May, when the first unlock was happening, and we were discussing how people are now getting some signals to sort of open or signals to recover. So, like, you'd given me an example of how UK had started opening up beaches so that people could start stepping out. So they didn't open public transport, but uh, people would step out and go to the beaches on their own. And that was one signal that they gave to the people, that now is the time that you start stepping out, and stay safe and stay home is fine, but then you have to continue living as well. So, like, I think in Indian advertising and marketing context, IPL and Diwali as a festive season was one of those bigger signals. And so how did you guys adapt or change gears from doing, like you were saying, essential or non-essential stuff, or thinking that, okay, now is the time that we need to just change gears and start going all out and go all out towards getting new business, delivering performance, and at the same time helping businesses recover, because they had opened up like just 2-3 months down the lane, and they were expecting immediate results. So how did you guys adapt to that change and that business requirement coming in from clientele across? Probably Rana, you could only start, and then others could.
I'll just give it more from a media perspective, and I know Anita is also on the call. I think we were pretty much geared that there will be a resurgence. So I think the entire industry, we were hoping that IPL happens. We were hoping that festivities, there is not a resurgence of the pandemic, because if some of those two things or three things would have happened, then that would have completely pretty much demolished whatever little bit of a positive energy or resurgence we were expecting. But for whatever reason it be, the numbers stood at a certain number. And I think the festive across, which started from Maharashtra, which was around August till September, October, Pongal, then one by one they all came, Durga Puja, then Diwali, then IPL and all. So naturally, the bit of a positive energy that has come in. The clients came back, many clients came back. It may not be of the numbers, and we've seen the quoted numbers that we saw in terms of the addicts and what kind of numbers came back. But a lot of clients came back and, the money came back into the television medium. Yes, outdoor as an experiential platform is completely shut, though a lot of work is happening in the digital medium. But a lot of advertising started coming in, and we were kind of prepared that launches will happen. Whether it is in terms of certain brands and categories, the launches will happen, and we saw many such launches happening. The car launches were happening. Hyundai and Kia both went ahead with their launches. So a lot of these movements were expected. The good thing that happened is that we didn't see the cases strongly coming back, so we could flow with the tide. Are the numbers really of comparable? No, it is not. But at least there's a lot of positive sentiment that's happened for 2021 to start in a better way.
Anita, you have something to add to that?
So I mean, I agree with Rana, because from an industry standpoint, the fact that Star was able to monetize IPL, fantastically well, with having sold out almost like 85% of the inventory, gave a huge momentum to everybody into thinking, saying, from questioning whether IPL is going to be successful to a no audience stadium play out, how is it going to kind of pan out, to actually having more than 150 advertisers finally coming on board. The kind of viewership numbers that we saw, delta uplift of about 20-28% on the overall numbers. The man minutes, just because people were sitting at home and watching the tournament itself. I think, the fact that Star did much better than what they did last year in terms of actual monetization of that piece. I think the good point was that all of it came together during festive, right? So the momentum was back. Every month was getting better than the previous month. And suddenly this entire piece of festive and IPL coming together really gave that boost to the larger ecosystem. You saw a lot of new players. If you looked at the advertising that was happening on IPL, the edtech guys were having a field day, whole host of them up there. The gaming category, again, a newer one that really came up. So not only from the conventional FMCG advertisers, who of course, because of essentials and the need that consumers were buying that, you had the whole host of the newer verticals of gaming, online, edtech, all of them really coming up and adding up to the larger bounty. So the resurgence that you really saw in and around IPL and festive together really bumped up the larger sentiment of consumers, people wanting to start going out, a little bit less careful than what they were because they were being there in their houses for the last 6 to 7 months. A bit of opening up of things also helped. So that's, I think, what the momentum really got on with IPL and festive coming together.
Right. And like I think there was this insight which a lot of people mentioned in our sessions as well as in common media, that there was a lot of pent up buying which was expected. So how did you guys as advertising and creative leaders tap onto that particular insight, and like what kind of work you thought of, like, and you managed to do to make the most out of that pent up buying behavior that you observed or seen? I think one of you could take a hit, like the ones which are more inclined towards the creative side of it.
Rohit? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Josy. and I think Hitesh did introduce me as CCO. So, I'll take that seriously. And I must tell Swati that she's kind of out now. So I'm the new CCO. But, the thing is, on this, basically the point that you're making, I think a lot of it was, of course, waiting for the same old to become the same old. But I think the way we were looking at it is, what are the new opportunities that the pandemic was throwing? So, the challenges that brands had in the marketplace. So, for instance, if you look at, we handle a lot of automotive brands. So the challenges that they had in terms of creating new launches, and talking to their dealers, talking to a larger set of the ecosystem, there were challenges there. Nerolac, for instance, had challenges because a lot of the painters were sitting idle at home. So what could we do using technology to actually bridge that? retail, for instance, fashion retail, cosmetics had challenges as well, because people weren't really, all malls were shut, and even when the malls were opening, people weren't going in and trying shirts or trying out lipstick shades and stuff like that. So the use of technology to actually come in and provide solutions for brands was really important to do. And we did that across a whole spectrum of brands, like the automotive sector, where we created a digital platform of recreating the offline experiences online, right? So how do you actually do that in a way that it's seamless? It feels like as if you're attending a live dealer meet or stuff like that. And Domino's, how do you create, in a pandemic, how do you create the sense of safety of food and food delivery? Because that was a big challenge. I mean, automotive and food retail, they went to zero, right? They've never ever seen zero sales, zero. So that was a big zero, and getting that back in track, getting that growth back, understanding what are the barriers that people have, and tackling those, moving that forward was really important. And I think using technology was a great way to look at solutions that were sustainable, right? And I think a lot of it would be used by clients going forward, saying that this is a new way, and maybe we'll keep that and keep engaging with consumers on that, in that form, going forward.
I'd like to go next, and I just want to add to what Rohit was saying. Year on year, we nearly have the same kind of problems. There is a certain cycle, and IPL follows, and Diwali, then there's a whole bunch of stuff, and then there's Christmas and end of the year. But this year threw up new problems, because you had the entire population sitting at home, and category after category. So we handle laptops. There, the thing was there were no laptops in the market because people were busy lapping up laptops, and there was a whole bunch of kids out there who still didn't have access, and that was the entire. When it comes to the oral care category, the people were sitting at home. We wanted them to brush more. So when it came to retail, people tentatively wanted to go out to shop, but they were scared. There was a whole bunch of old people who wanted to shop. So some of the retail employees became concierges who kind of help people shop. So like Rohit said, using technology, using some interventionary measures, using behavioral sciences, I think it went beyond advertising this time, because at the end of the day, clients needed solutions, and we were their partners, and there was nobody that they had to turn to, and they were hustling as well. So in that sense, maybe it may not show up in numbers, but this will really show up in effects and after effects in the years to come.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, so I was just adding on to what Anil was saying, right? I think one of the things that's very interesting is I know we tout that term quite commonly. If there was one term that was probably overused in 2020, it was the word called digital transformation. And I think while it's imperative and a lot of those decisions are being taken at a very fundamental level, one of those things that you've realized as you transform not just the business and the brand, but also transform the kind of experiences and the interfaces which users are actually interfacing with brands. And there's this very interesting saying, right, which says that the greatest force on earth is friction. And trying to remove that friction for users became the one main KPI, if you were to focus on that. And I think this was done in a very clunky manner, what you would typically call as very jugadu kind of a way in the beginning. But then now increasingly businesses are looking at how do you then build the infrastructure layer in order to ensure that you use technology and use those digital points to then build upon it. So I was actually in China during the early stages of 2001 when SARS was taking place. And one of the things that becomes very clear during the 2010-2011 period is that there was a huge acceleration around e-commerce. And that's why if you see China's consumption around e-commerce is significant, is because there was this one huge change and shift that essentially happened. So that's something that you would typically start to see again here, because this is something that was a very common limitation of constraint. And then whatever is born out of constraint essentially has a much longer longevity, as it were. So I think there are some of these that are not going away very quickly. But as, back to Hitesh's point, which is, were there any revenge buys? I think we saw that in some categories, but we're seeing buys come back a little bit more structurally, and the shape and form of it has changed to a certain extent. So that's how consumption has essentially adapted itself.
I'd like to go from there. Sorry, Josy, am I butting in?
No, go ahead, Pooja.
So the points that he was talking about, experiences. I think customer experiences and brand experiences were a large conversation. And how many of you have been on a panel that spoke about MarTech? Because I have at least 4, and digital transformation, probably 4 others. So those were obviously the keywords of the year. A lot of clients focused on it. I think we saw a huge jump on the focus on technology for our brands. A lot of us who have tried to have conversations on MarTech and technology and were pushed out of the door were invited in to say, okay, let's have those meaningful discussions now, and I'm putting money on the table. So we saw a lot of that happen for us this year. And that also helped shape a lot of companies like us, and I'll say young companies, because in relation to everyone here, we're fairly young. We're just 10 years old as an organization, and we reshaped ourselves because everything became about experiences. Everything went from how every touch point felt exactly the same, and suddenly we were the most important people in the room because we were able to speak that language. So for me, the way I see 2021 was a year of brilliant transformation, not just for our clients' businesses, but also for ours, because I felt like we grew tenfold, may not be in numbers immediately, but I think in experience, and that's going to, the result of it, we're going to see hopefully this in the next year, because we added about 5 tech businesses in the last 6 months, because the only conversation we had were about experiences and MarTech, because that really truly changed the game. It was not about big campaigns anymore, but about how am I going to fundamentally at a local level be able to move product which was sitting on shelf. So that was it was an exciting year. Lots was done, lots was learned.
May I go next?
Of course.
Thanks, Pooja. I'll get into content, which is that for us, the theme around that time, so April, May, June was more like a rehearsal, and you sort of motivated yourself to find new ways of doing things. And so you realize it's possible. And everyone went into the next 3 months, which was closing in on festival, saying, yeah, now I can do it. Let's do it. But then what was the themes that were emerging was actually quite spontaneously human. We were seeing intergenerational stories coming from our people. The fact that there was a change happening was also coming through the intergenerational aspect of how people are coping with it. And that was creating very interesting content stories. Same thing with closer relationships. So because you've spent so much time at home and you're focusing on friend and family, the stories began to be more about relationships. So yeah, this interesting play of people seemed to be the theme around that time for us.
Ritu, you have something to add?
No, I just say that, when it comes to revenge buying, I think what was amazing is that everybody was prepared for it to happen. Like there was not a single client who sat back and said in a state of despair that, oh God, what will happen and what are we going to do about it? I think everybody was geared up, and everybody, what was really amazing was everybody was very happily geared up. Like every client was saying, okay, this is the situation, can we do some innovations? We've got to be ready for the festival. I think the anticipation, and I think, like I said in the beginning, everybody was in it together. So at some point it was a great leveler. Like even our clients who were gearing up, they knew, you instinctively also knew what to do for the consumers, because you were a consumer too. All of us were feeling the same thing at the same time. Come festival, say come IPL, everybody knew nobody's going to go to a stadium to watch it, and you were all in the same boat. So I think instinctively, as marketing and creative people, a lot of things came naturally to us, because we've never been more connected to the lives of our consumers as we've been now. Because Diwali for me was staying at home, and so was it for consumers of any brand. We were all in the same thing. So I think instinctively a lot of work connected to a lot of people, because we were all feeling the same way too. So I think that to me happened for the first time, that you didn't have to think, oh, how how is a person going to react to a piece of work? He or she's going to react to the piece of work exactly as you are, because it's happening to you as it's happening to them. So I think the one thing to applaud was that all the people, there was no state of despair. I think everybody was prepared, and because you felt that you want to go out there and buy something or do something, you knew other people would do the same. And I think that was amazing.
Just want to add to Ritu, what Ritu is saying here, and this is like another more, a thread of, right from the start, and now we are on the verge of a vaccination, hopefully, and things will happen fast. Was this thread of optimism, right from our prime minister to governments to agency leaders to client leads. I did not see too many shoulders drooping. People were like, "Bring it on, let's face it." This could have gone another way too. We could have all shut shop and sat like broken. But and I haven't seen a pandemic or a world war or things like this before. But genuinely, as human beings and the way they reacted, I think it was good. So though there are losses and damages, but I think it will help all of us in the long run.
So I'll just jump into a new section altogether, which I thought while having this discussion that probably we could wrap up the session with a quick, you have paid forward, a quick question answer chain, wherein each panelist gets to ask a question to the other panelist, and then that panelist asks a question to the other one. And then we complete the entire chain, and you guys can wrap up your learnings from 2021, from 2020 while answering that question as well. So who would want to start this chain? I would be the first one to do this. Pooja, you want to go? Or Ritu, probably you could take a go.
I think I think my favorite guru is on the panel, Josy.
And
everyone's favorite guru.
Yeah, but
don't do this.
What, Josy? You've hidden away just because.
No. It's, yeah.
So I don't know. I think I've worked with Josy, and I know that Josy is an extremely optimistic person. So the one question that I mean, Hitesh, you kind of threw it on all of us. So I'm thinking while I'm asking, but I'm saying, Josy, was how in your head, how did you predict this would happen? And how did you think this year would go? And did it go any differently from what you had thought? Like in March when this happened, how did you think this is going to go? And then, did it go the way you expected, or was it different?
No, I'm sure it's everybody's answer. There's no way we could have predicted this. And I think when it began, you thought it was going to last a couple of months. And so you worked it out and you started embracing the birds and all the sounds you heard because of the silence. And you started going deeper within yourself. If it was like a forced vipassana. But then from that, I think came a lot of incredible strength for everybody. So, and at the same time, there were a lot of breakdowns and meltdowns. So I don't know. I mean, you never I didn't plan this at all, and I didn't want to plan it, and I didn't want any control. It was pure surrender. I said, come and take me. That's the way I looked at these months. And it was just so welcoming after that. So yeah, the one word for you is, I didn't know, couldn't predict, so I surrendered.
Wait, Josy, you would pass on the question to who? I mean, to which panelists? And
but what should the question be?
Josy, you have to ask.
You have to ask the
whatever
question.
comes to your mind, Josy.
About this subject, right? Yeah. So Anil spoke a lot, about optimism. How did you keep your people going? Yeah, were there people worried, scared, resignations? Pooja said she managed the mental makeup of the organization. So how did you keep that inner rock and roll, if I may say?
No, so that's interesting. Out of all of this, us getting business, hanging on to clients business, all of that was par for the course. There were wins and losses and stuff. But the thing I was most worried for was the people. Partly because ours is such a people industry, we keep seeing each other, we feed off each other's energies. And suddenly I was talking to people across this little screen, half of them on non-video mode most of the time. And I just felt like I was losing connection with people. So one of the things that we did was we realized that this is not going to go too far and we are going to lose connect with most of our people because they're all dispersed to various parts of the country. So we created these little groups where, almost like each one help one kind of a stuff where we needed micro groups to kind of look after each other because, we really didn't know and people didn't know what each of us were going through. So that was one. Keeping, like Pooja was saying, a close eye on the and ears to the ground on the mental health. And last but not the least was to keep them busy because there were also periods where a bunch of people would be busy, so maybe some of the others weren't. So it required a lot of close observation of people, something that we don't do in a normal day. We kind of see through people and it's off and it's business as usual. But I realized that people were the most affected asset as far as this pandemic goes. But hopefully it's behind us and we should all kind of bounce back to normal. I have a question for Ritu. Ritu, have you? No, Ritu answered a question, right? I need to ask somebody else.
No, I didn't answer. I asked a question.
You asked a question.
So you can ask me.
Yes. So, Ritu, my question to you is, as a creative person and also being in the business of, ideas and again feeding off people's energies and stuff like that. One, what were your learnings? What did you do? And going forward, to the young people out there, the young creative people out there, what would your message be?
So I think I had written a piece about it. My father always used two words for everything in life, and he used to say for everything, "Oh, minor point." Like, he used to always say this, "Oh, minor point." So even if from the biggest problem like dad, I think I'm flunking maths. Oh, minor point. I grew up with this philosophy that, it's really nothing is that big a deal. So I think I use that a lot when I think it was very important to keep talking to people. It was about, we were not in office, we were not going across and meeting people, and we were not going across and just chit-chatting with people. And I think we're in the business of communication, but we very often didn't know how to communicate with each other in this time. So I think other than the communication that we create for the world outside, for all of us to keep going and feeding off each other's energy and learning stories and observing people, I think it was very important to communicate with each other. So the one thing that I know we did was we kept the communication open. So even if it meant just randomly talking to two people from the office over a Zoom call, chit-chatting, not talking about work, but just talking about things. And, that line of communication had to be open. And we got a lot of conversations going, with that. So I think what was scary for me is that, as creative people, when you don't go out and you don't go out and meet people, you don't go out and observe things. Where do you get your energy from? Where do you get the thinking from? So I really encourage people to talk a lot to each other. And I think my message to any young creative person would be keep talking to each other, keep looking at each other, even if it's on a Zoom call or a telephone call, even if you're alone at home, just find time to get together and have a chat. And I think that is very critical, to not forget to communicate with each other.
I think, Ritu, you'll have to continue the chain, ask a question to someone.
Oh, I did, but I asked Josy, so I'll have to nominate someone.
Yeah, you can nominate someone to ask a question.
I'll ask the question, right? So I'm good at asking questions. Rana, there's a question for you. What do you see as the future of the workspace going forward? I mean, how do you see our, the new work life transform going into 2021 and beyond?
So I think naturally it's a perfect question because I think we're all discussing it across most of the agencies and groups. I think clearly two things are coming out, at least that's what I'm observing. There is naturally a clear belief of working from home, which is, people, you can work from home and you can manage an office space. So there is a clear belief of that. But I think the way I'm putting a filter to that point number one is that, working from home is now a more acceptable way of working and not a permanent way of working. What I mean by that is there are many little changes that we are doing in our processes and our little books where we used to have certain very strong mandates about punching in, punching out and all of that. I think all of that needs to be far more flexible because we know that now we can work from home and we can manage lives and we can do many more things. So I think that's one that is clearly coming out that we have to be more open, we have to be more adaptable, and as individuals who've grown up in a certain way, I think that model is definitely coming out. So whether you call it hybrid, whether you call it, I think the second point, Rohit, that is naturally very, very clear that we need to go back to work also. So the point is that, if we are in the business of creative and advertising, whether it is some form of, ours is all about, like we saying, like Ritu was saying, you need to keep talking. We are the business of ideas. And I'm one of the biggest, supporters and advocates of saying that if we don't have ideas, and ideas can only come when we are meeting and talking. And so I think we need to move back to a zone where, we are interacting more, we are meeting more people. So I firmly see a way of life coming back. I may be the only one, I may be one of the few in this world. I think life is going to come back the way we were working before. More and more people are going to be working the way we were. And I think that maybe in a year and a half, a lot of things will go back to the way things were of interactions, ideas, conversations and all. So a two-world conversation, if I may say, a more flexible way of working, where we have to accept certain norms. But in our business, I think we need to go back to work. That's what I would say.
We've been working, Rana. We've been working. We have to go back to work in office. Don't say that we weren't working. Right?
Like you said, our factories need to go back to office space. I like this line. Your office is a shut us. So I wanted to ask a question because it's my turn. I want to ask Anita the question. Anita, we were discussing something about the resurgence of the IPL and everything. And we know that IPL is coming back again in April and all. What kind of a uplift or what kind of a trend are you seeing this year in the overall scenario in media and everything for this year coming forward? Do you see a lot more spend? Do you see clients coming back in a bigger way, or do you see this trend continuing at least for H1 of the year, and maybe again we do the same process like last year? What do you think is going to happen?
I think, Rana, we will have to be agile and nimble in our projections of the numbers as well. We've obviously, continued to keep projections at a quarter level right up from kind of showing us the end numbers of 2020, where from a Dentsu standpoint, we talked about being about 17.5% lower compared to what the market was. We've seen obviously television while down, holding up a bit compared to the other mediums. The few other ones, whether it's cinema, out of home, have been completely, in the 30 to 50, 80 zone kind of minus numbers. Digital being the saving number that we're looking at from last year. With IPL, we're being cautiously optimistic about the numbers. I don't know whether we're going to reach the 2019 numbers. I have my reservations on that. We're trying to say, my sense is we may be slightly lesser than 2019 numbers, but hopefully if things work in well and the second half becomes that much more better as a push from festive, because you have your IPL in the same quarter, which is again a heavier quarter, and then festive usually is when India lands up spending. If both kind of take on very well, we should be able to kind of come inch closer to the 2019 exit numbers. But for me, it's going to be cautiously optimistic numbers going forward. I think we will have to, at a quarter level, keep evaluating. Just January is looking up in terms of momentum. So we are literally keeping like a monthly watch on where the trajectory is happening. But overall, I think we may not land up hitting the 2019 numbers in 2021. So my question is going to be to Pooja. And Pooja, this is more around culture. And I know Glitch, with the young company that you are, 10 years old, etc. and everything, there is a lot of action that happens in and around, let's say, learning, keeping yourself up to date with the newer technologies, your conversations around being on, forums like digital transformation and MarTech, etc. and everything. From that L&D agenda, from a glitch standpoint or a WPP standpoint, what are your thoughts for, given that 2020 has happened and 2021 is going to be a different year? How do you see this entire L&D piece, shape up for yourselves as an organization?
I like that question, Anita. Thanks. Because it is a key focus for us as a company. And I think, as always, we're sort of doing it a bit differently because we do believe that experts come from everywhere. And it's not just about the number of years you have, but, the kind of experience you've really lived. And which is why L&D is actually happening really internally and through our network agencies. Like, for Anil and I, for example, work so closely together and host capability clinics where we teach each other things that we know. Someone's talking about culture, someone's talking about religion, someone's talking about actual expertise when it comes to, technology or data or e-com, etc. But there's also these finer things that are going to start that we're going to start doing. And so L&D is not just about getting very, very senior people to talk to you about their experiences, but each other, talking to each other about your experiences. And I think that has been very, very useful for us as an organization because it keeps us very, very tight to culture and we have a very key eye on culture, which is important. And I know we're in a rush and we're going to wrap up. So I'm going to ask Preetham the last question. And for you, Preetham, I want to know one of them, because I have an offbeat question for you. It has very little to do with possibly your everyday job, but could be possibly interesting for all of us, is that talk to me about a unique client experience you had in this year that you have sat back and held your head on and said, oh my God, I can't believe I just attended that meeting. Don't name the client, but say it.
No, actually, the way you position that, it sounds that it's contextually a little negative, but then I would say that I could still hold my head and then say, wow, that's surprising that it's coming from the client. I think just to take up on that, increasingly, when it comes to digital transformation at the core end, what increasingly happens is that people need to fuel that with data. That means understanding the consumers over a continuum at all given points in time. That's the only thing that's going to fuel your digital transformation agenda. There's nothing else, right? That's the fuel that's going to drive it. And I think a lot of clients have not taken that as seriously as they should be as they curate their first party data from every effort that they put out there when it comes to marketing. So while we continue to do these presentations, and I think the teams did that in 2019, did that all the way through the first quarter of 2020, one of the clients just comes back and says, hey guys, we need to talk about data now. And they backed it with money, right? So that becomes extremely interesting because, it takes a pandemic of sorts, and that's when you go like, wait, we did about 6 sessions in the last 2 quarters and it didn't bear fruit. And then suddenly something like a pandemic makes you realize the importance of data now and then bring that into the core way that you want to function. So I think we're going to have a lot of those hair-raising moments as well, but I suspect it's going to be more positive than it's going to be negative. So that's how I'd like to respond to that.
Awesome, that's great. But thank you, Hitesh. I need to log off as well.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Everyone for sparing our time for this. I hope people watching us have derived some learnings from this interaction. I look forward to engaging with each one of you in the near future. Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks to all
everyone.
those who tuned in as well. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.